Good day. These comments are made for the hearing held before the House Budget Committee on the International Day of the Woman. And the topic was ensuring women can thrive in a post-pandemic economy. So these are basically a riff off of my budgetary proposals from last June, which the Senate has not yet taken up, although the House passed them. I want to build back better, bigger, so we'll be talking about that, and then we'll talk about how to get any bill passed on this in this area. So the first point was workforce development for additional years of free education, historic investments in education, and my comment is too often women in government provided training programs, especially TANF, are pushed into occupational fields for the benefit of society, not for the women themselves or even to meet their true potential. Many are victims of inadequate education as they were coming up. We owe it to them, as we leave the pandemic, to take the opportunity to right decades of bad behavior by the educational and public welfare systems. There should be no such thing as low-wage work. The more we can channel people into appropriate training, the more traditionally low-wage jobs will have to pay to meet staffing needs. So, most importantly, participation in education, remedial ESL, or training should be paid the statutory minimum wage, which should be up to at least $10 an hour immediately. Not in a phase-in immediately. We can phase later to something like 12 or 13 or 18. But for now, social services would direct educationally underserved women and men, regardless of their immigration status, to the most appropriate training or placement program based on their potential, not the need for people to clean bedpans. It's, frankly, the specter of teaching poor black and white women to clean up the bedpans of old white women in nursing homes is just, it's boggles the imagination that that's become the standard of what TANF training has become. And it's not just women; it's men who should have this kind of should get full educational opportunity as well. Whether it's ex-offenders or just people who got into the wrong job and could do better. And pretty much everybody can do better than some of the low-wage jobs we have out there. So. So stipends and child credit payments would come through the education provider and be included in their invoice to the state government. Signing up for training should require no screening process for eligibility. There shouldn't be like long, drawn-out process where you have to show your documents and do all this. You basically sign up and you go. And you can do some checking. They'll show a driver's license or even your driver's license from wherever you're from. Something to prove you are who you are. And even if you're not documented, we don't make school children be documented. So people who haven't been served by the educational system shouldn't have to do it either, and they should be paid. Okay, so that's the next thing is make critical investments in childcare. As stated last year, child care arrangements should be a responsibility of the employer, including if it's an educational institution. So if you're going to University of District of Columbia or Montgomery College, there should be child care available on site, and it should be paid for through your training program. So, and again, if you're over the age of 16 and you're in school, you should be paid. So, and even in private school, you should be paid. So, in fact, just as an aside that's not included in the written comments, since Espinoza versus Montana, there's an argument to be made that private school has to be paid, as if a public education provider it's accredited. So, we're not there yet, but we're going to be there soon because we have to be. And those students should be paid too, and their tuition should be, for the most part, free. So you got to pay opportunity cost if you want an outcome. So tax incentives would thus be would for employer provided childcare or school provided childcare would be an offset to the employer paid tax, preferably one on total value added, both labor and capital. And I talk about that more in my tax reform plan that you've already seen, but I have added it in the attachments, and there'll be an attachment in the comments as well. And in smart growth urban planning, training in childcare should either be in the neighborhood or where the person works, and there should be sick childcare and all that, and doctors on site, or at least nurses, so you could have sick kids would still go in, but they would be taken care of with other sick kids, or isolated, but it shouldn't keep people out of work if possible. And in smart growth planning, of course, the workplace and the neighborhood would be closer together, much closer together. That's what smart growth is all about. You put housing close to the work and work close to the housing. So the next one, create universal and family leave. The free market cannot provide such benefits universally, so they must, one, be required so that everybody has to do them, and to aid marginal firms, these benefits would be paid as an offset to employer paid taxes as above. The same thing with childcare. So if a company is too small to provide sick leave, well, the subtraction value added tax, which I again talk about below, would have as an offset, and big companies could use this too. The amount paid in universal and family leave. So if sick leave, if you have a kid, you should be able. That could be a tax exempt activity, or even a tax preferred activity. It would lower the employer's taxes. So next. And this is the big one, extend key benefits to lower and middle income workers and their families, deliver nutrition security, et cetera, and all families should receive these benefits, especially child tax credit, which should also come from the employer paid tax. Self-employed workers with children and only one client should be considered employees of their client. If wealthier households benefit too much from tax benefits, they should still get them, but they should be paying more tax. If it's a question of whether a supervisor versus an engineer versus the janitor, they should all get the same benefit. And if they make too much more money, then tax them more. But tax them separately. So tax their income separately as workers, but have the benefit come through the employer, and all children would be treated equally, and then use an employer surtax or a wage surtax or an asset value added tax to grab the high incomes. You can use different income streams. The child tax credit should support the income of each dependent child at median wage levels and be fully refundable. Median wage levels, and 3,000 a year is not a median wage level. It should be higher than that. So if families participate in education, then the credit should be paid with a training stipend set to the minimum wage. Including these benefits with pay reduces the need for a $15 minimum wage. Say that again. If you pay families with kids that credit, and it's big enough, then you don't have to have 15, because people with more kids would get the higher stipend. And if the minimum wage is too low, you raise it for singles. But but people are hanging out single way too long for the good of the species. I know that people say, no, it's global warming, but there's a lot of room and there's a lot of water on this planet. So, but that's a conversation for another day. Right now we want families to be treated fairly. This is not the time to get all Malthusian. Paid training, an adequate child credit, and higher minimum wages allow for an end to SNAP and TANF for most women and their families. People would just go to school, be paid to go to school, and get their child benefits when they're in school. It would be a lot simpler than having a huge bureaucracy. So this is something the Republicans should look at. If you don't like big bureaucracies, great, don't have them, but then don't make poverty a crime, which is what essentially has happened. These reforms must be scored as pro-life legislation and be funded more broadly than the president has promised. We are all for raising taxes on the wealthy, but these funds funds from the wealthy should be targeted to national defense, net interest payments, and debt reduction, starting with the Social Security Trust Fund. An asset value added tax, which is described below in our, along with our employer-paid subtraction VAT, should be the primary way the wealthy are taxed. In fact, it essentially is, except we call it a capital gains and dividend tax. For the highest wage people, salaries are not a big thing. It's their capital, it's their asset income, and that should be taxed separately, and that should be high enough. And again, making tax benefits adequate would have the 1099 economy go away. Having served on the staff of a major abortion rights organization in the past, I can assure you that no such organization would ever oppose higher living standards for women and their families. Like I said, this has got to be scored as a pro-life bill. The chief obstacle for funding families is not the feminist movement. It's the so-called right to life movement, who would rather women be penalized for having abortions than subsidized so that they are not necessary. Over the course of many decades, I have had conversations with conservative members of the pro-life community. When push comes to shove, they oppose the measures above because their objections to abortion are about sexuality than the welfare of children. The common phrase is, why do I want to subsidize somebody else for having sex? That's essentially their view. Now, in the pro-choice movement, many jump to defend women's bodies arguments before addressing the need for adequate family income. When you do that, you can then shame the leadership of the pro-life movement into supporting Build Back Better, because if you say, no, you guys are about sex, you need to be about children, you lose. They lose the Republicans lose their argument against these things. Many of the pro-life movement already do support Build Back Better. Catholic Charities USA Network and the Catholic Health Association all stand with working and poor women. They must be publicly leveraged to get the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops behind them as well, to have the bishops insist that these measures be considered must-pass legislation for the computation of pro-life voting records. Republicans like the pro-life voting records, but it should be a requirement to have a pro-life voting record to support Build Back Better. Catholic members of Congress and the President should also lead this effort in getting the bishops to do the right thing. It is time to stop grandstanding on this issue. These measures must pass, and on a larger scale than provided for in Build Back Better. On this International Day of the Woman, how can we not do so? Shame on us for not doing everything to get this passed and not grandstanding it, not making it an election issue, not trying to get a bigger majority, because they'll keep going back and forth until we discuss this very issue, that it's pro-life to be pro-family and to fund families. Do that and adequately pay for it. And, most of our worst arguments are behind us, which is not good for, operatives, but it's certainly good for families. Thank you very much for your time. I hope to see this on your website. Bye-bye.